Ravi Zacharias.
Dr. Ravi Zacharias is one of the world's foremost Christian apologists. He equips Christians to defend their faith and has debated some of the world's most well-known spiritual skeptics. A visiting professor at Wycliffe Hall of Oxford, where he teaches apologetics and evangelism, he has also lectured at prestigious universities such as Harvard, Princeton, and Oxford. A radio host and prolific author, Dr. Zacharias has more than 20 books to his credit. But it was his own biography, Walking from East to West, that held some of the most surprising revelations, including his painful struggles in school, his furiously strict father, and a teenage suicide attempt. He was in Toronto recently, and I had a chance to sit down with him.
Dr. Zacharias, you recently wrote your memoirs, Walking from East to West, and it was surprising for me to read about you. You're so known for speaking to intellectuals and debating atheists. You actually didn't do that well in school growing up. Tell me about that.
It's really a very strange journey for me. A lot of it had to do with interest, aptitude, effort. You know, you really put your effort, Cheryl, behind what grabs you, what interests you, and studies never did. And so I was one colossal flop all the way through till my teens when I found the Lord.
You haven't always had such a deep faith in God, even though you did go to church when you were younger. You were an atheist. What happened?
My dad used to take us to church. Service would be over at 9. My cricket matches started at 10 Sunday morning. That's all I lived for, the cricket pitch, the cricket field. That's what it was. It was God had been marginalized. Oh yeah, examination time and all, if you're up there, please help me, I need you type thing. But then, you know, I lived in India, born and raised there, and pressure to perform and studies is number one in India. You don't just pass, you better pass right at the top or you're in trouble. And I was in trouble. And I knew I wasn't going to make it. The maximum number of suicides in India happen every year after the examinations, because people don't see a future if they haven't performed well. Well, I was one of those statistics. I'd attempted to take my own life, and I was in a hospital room. And somebody brought me a Bible. That was the last thing I expected to see. And yet, through the reading of the scriptures there, and the passage was read to me from John chapter 14, Jesus saying to Thomas in a conversation, because I live, you also shall live. So there I was at the age of 17 saying, Jesus, if you are who you claim to be, take control of my life. I don't know how to live. I don't even know if I want to live, but I want life. I don't have it now. If you will take charge of my life and give me what I need, I will leave no stone unturned in my pursuit of truth. That's what happened. Atheism is a strong word. I would say I lived as if I was an atheist.
Well, you are so known for defending our faith and debating with atheists. A lot of Christians are so grateful that you fulfill that role for us. But many of them think, well, but that's not my calling, or that's not really my strength. Are we all supposed to be able to defend our faith?
We are all apologists, whether we realize it or not. The only question is whether we're good or bad apologists. And those are not my words, that's C.S. Lewis's. But that does not mean apologetics, which is the discipline of the defense of the Christian faith in the academy. The apologetics of touch is equally important, caring for the needy, having compassion for the poor. That is an apologia. That is an apologetic. You know, people will look at that life and say, why is this person doing this for me? The apologetics of relationships, where you befriend somebody. If you meet, for example, people in the Islamic world, most of those who have come to Christ from that part of the world will tell you it was either a dream that God spoke to them or the love of Christ that they saw in somebody else. So we're all apologists. However, I think we should all work at one thing that we don't often work at. Even if we don't have the answers to people's questions, we should at least know where the resources are. You know, I can say, for example, look, I'm not big into science, but I know exactly where you need to go to pick up a book and what website you need to get onto, where the answers are there.
You know, there's a portion of Christianity that says you need to be able to defend the faith and study and be educated. There's another part that says really Christianity is more experiential than it is a discipline of the mind. Which is it, or is it both? Are they in competition?
Absolutely, Cheryl. It is both. And if you miss either one of them, I think you shortchange yourself. You know, I think it was Archbishop William Temple who said the longest journey in life is between the head and the heart. And if you don't allow it to filter down, it becomes a cerebrally driven thing. I have seen Christian philosophers and apologists whose life I would not want to emulate, whose personality didn't touch me, whose intellect did. On the other hand, I found people of tremendous devotional strength, but who really don't think things through when the questioner or the skeptic comes to ask them. This is the balance. It is the indispensable balance, and if you don't connect the two, you actually, that which God had joined together, we have put asunder.
You know, when you're talking about speaking to this generation, you are speaking to a postmodern world. A lot of people in the church are very negative about postmodernism. Is it inherently evil?
Postmodernism is a mood much more than it is a kind of an organized movement. Postmodernism was at the Garden of Eden when Adam and Eve said, "Has God really said?" What did postmodernism do? It questioned propositional truth. Does a statement really mean what it says, or do you fuse your own meaning into any statement? So postmodernism questioned verbal authority. That's where it all began. You don't leave the authority with the authority goes to the reader. So you can read a book and you become sovereign over the author. Postmodernism is a mixed bag. There are some very dangerous elements to it where absolute truth became conditioned and relativism took hold, but you really don't want a relativist in the lab. You don't want a relativist for a pilot. You know, you don't want to say, I know that's what the tower is saying, and I know this is what the instruments are saying, but I'm going to fuse my own meaning into these readings. So life cannot be lived on the postmodern cutting edge. One thing postmodernism has done, which is constructive, it has a hunger for community. And that's where I think the church should rise.
Well, when you're talking about absolutes, the Bible is a very absolute kind of book.
Mm-hmm.
How do you communicate, you know, Christian absolutes to a culture that kind of resists that idea?
And what happened when Adam and Eve were challenged with God's laws? The interesting thing is this: there was only one prohibition, only one. In the day that you eat of the knowledge of the tree of good and evil, you shall surely die. And we were told not to eat of that, because in the day we would eat of that, we would be as God, knowing good and evil. What it really meant was we would redefine good and evil. You and I don't have the right to do that. The moment you and I redefine good and evil, and we come up with two different definitions, whose good is going to trump the other person's good. That's exactly what has happened in our culture today. We make decisions ad hoc, whether it's on taxes, whether we cheat or not, whether it's on marriages, whether it's in relationships, whether it's in the job or whatever, and we go through different arenas, Cheryl, every day, each with its different ethos. And the collapse of our culture today symptomatically is in economics, but actually is in morality. That's where it all began. You know, I said to a New York Times person who was interviewing me, I said, you know, why are we all so shocked? We taught them in our Ivy League schools that ethics is all relative. And then when they became the head of Enron and acted as relativists, we put them in jail. What has happened? Money has no point of reference anymore. People borrowed without the ability to repay. In my wallet, I carry a $100 million bill. It's an authentic bill, but it's from Zimbabwe, where there is nothing worth anything.
I was going to say, wow, hand over your wallet.
Exactly, you know, exactly. This is the point. But what's it worth?